Absolutely one of the main reasons the original Forest game was so successful was down to its creepy enemies that you came across. From cannibals to ferocious wildlife and of course the Creepies. What ones might be returning, taking a fresh deeper look at the new ones and talking about the AI and big changes and additions. The monsters of Sons of the Forest. So it appears to be 3 main factions at the moment, consisting of the villager cannibals, the muddy cannibals, and then we've got the Creepies that live and inhabit the caves. Each one of these factions can interact with each other and mainly get into possible fights. While you'll be ransacking and trying to get rid of all of the cannibals in the village, you might come across a bunch of the Muddies attacking at the same time. So it looks like the cannibals have advanced quite rapidly since we last saw them. Now with definitive pecking order amongst them, with these leaders wearing their masks. Although it's not 100% confirmed yet whether or not this is a separate faction that wear the masks or if they are just indeed the leaders. But the devs have spoken at length how leadership and certain enemies will have leadership qualities inside them. Stands to reason that their physical appearance would stand out a little bit more. Various scenes from the trailer show one of these leaders throttling another likely cannibal villager, which to me indicates that possibly a punishment for being scared or not maybe committing enough into fighting us or someone else. I don't think he's actually throttling any of the Muddies, and he's clearly not another one of the Creepies. So making the masks out of the resin in the 3D printers that we'll find in the bunkers seems like a really key part of the game. Possibly leading us to become allies with certain members if we're wearing our masks. The rest of the cannibals do look like they've got a lot of variety in what they're wearing this time. Many of the cannibals covered in more blood or paint, white paint especially, and of course more body parts as armour, but particularly interesting is the clothing that they will be wearing. Some things may be stolen from you, others they may be making themselves. We know that in harsher times they may even try to steal or be wearing certain pieces of clothing to keep warm for winter. And that's a component of what they may be doing, not only just trying to exterminate you, but coming to take your goods. Whether it's stealing log walls or possibly your resources during the harshest winter months. N-Night have spoken about stats and really addressing that there's not simply just fear and anger, and 2 of the stats that we can see pretty demonstrated easily. There's going to be things like religion, leadership, dedication and morale. Each one of these stats will give each cannibal or mutant or creature their own personality. So it's easy to see how some of the smaller villagers may be lacking in leadership, maybe having more of a fear stat, could easily be punished by some of the leaders who are pretty angry and don't like them being scared. The enemies are going to remember how you interact with them. They will put that in the back of their minds next time they face off against you, possibly if you don't finish the job, or it could be how you influence and change the villagers around you. Using crosses or religious emblems to ward them off might give one of them the idea about religion, and that might be spread to others who become even more scared next time you come across them when you whip out your cross. That's a bit of speculation there, but that's how I imagine it going, and a lot of the gameplay trailer clips kind of show it too. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all really combines, whether or not they do end up becoming just a bit samey because the stats aren't differentiated enough or really affect the gameplay. But N-Night seem pretty confident in their AI system, developing something pretty new and changing and adjusting what they've had before to make it something hopefully that becomes a standard for so many other games. Originally, Sons of the Forest wasn't even going to be the direct sequel. They were working on something else or to do with this AI, and then realised that actually a sequel to the Forest would be the best way to demonstrate it. So, elite looking leaders who have maybe more anger in them and have got the ideas of religion definitely give commands to some of the smaller ones. But hopefully there's a way that we can placate them and not just using the masks for a brief moment. It would be really cool if we could infiltrate a full village, take items we wanted and walk out of there. N-Night do state that we will have less encounters with any of the cannibals during the winter months, although you can see some in the trailers. Fighting them in the snow looks pretty cool. They're just trying to survive and get by just like you. So while winter will hopefully give us a respite from maybe daily attacks or occurrences, it does mean that once summer is here, we might come across even more villagers than before. So what about the Muddies? Well, these seem to be ones that are living more feral inside the forest and other biomes. To me, it seems like these are possibly some of the mutants from the caves that managed to escape and haven't fully acclimatized or assimilated to living on the island. You see them scurrying and crawling around the undergrowth in the forest more, and they are mostly covered in very dark dirt and mud. They also have more of an appearance of the regular mutants that we came across in the caves in the first one. So perhaps some of their ideas will be a bit more basic, or will have the same sort of interaction or chances to inspire or make them fear us as we do with the villagers. By their nature, if they're not as evolved, they'll be more prone to things like fire, lightning, and of course be willing to run away a little bit more if we go ahead and attack them. One thing all of these factions will have in common is that they do get tired. When they go to run away from you, it's not simply just to be a little bit challenging, it's because they're trying to find somewhere so they can rest a little bit. We only really see a few snapshots of these Muddies, so definitely don't want to speculate too much further, but I would imagine they're like the lesser class. Maybe some of the ones that we'll encounter first, certainly if we're making a home in the forest itself before exploring some of the larger villages. Really do hope there will be relationships. That's what End Knight kind of called it. Some mutants will be scared and run away immediately when you attack their friends. Others will be enraged because they've got high anger and high morale, and that could really lead to some unique one-off experiences or differences every time you fight, rather than just getting pretty generic with them. The AI in the first game was always pretty astounding to me, how they scurry along, take time to retreat and try and strafe to get to you. So to improve on that and possibly have some sort of nemesis system like Shadow of War, that would be really interesting. Another really interesting facet is if you do go ahead and wipe out one faction or another, that may spell disastrous consequences, particularly if you get rid of too many villagers. And Knight have stated that this might mean more Creepies roaming around unchecked. That's right, the Creepies will also be another faction that maybe doesn't get along with the rest of the inhabitants and are out there for themselves. Amongst the mutants, or the Creepies as End Knight called them, we've got some of the newer ones like the twins, fused at the hip, they're conjoined, with one of them being skinnier with a dent in its head, and they both crawl across the floor as one, and ceilings possibly trying to outflank players. And we've got Blobby, maybe seen as a large mass at the end of the first game, albeit shrunken down a little bit now. Clearly they've been working out at the gym since last time we saw them. Huge mass of body parts with limbs that will pull along, throwing baby mutants at you as it tries to get close for a big nice cuddle. The ending of trailer 3 shows this off as we see what we seemingly think might be Timmy and his father shooting or protecting us as we look on from the ground below. Of course, fingers and upper torso filled with horrible fingers that will pull you in and claw you to death. Probably don't rely on eyes since it doesn't appear to have any, so how do they catch their prey? Now it might have just been a trick of either the gameplay or trailer, just showing the character holding a cross in defense against some of the fingers, but maybe the fingers can take on board some of them ideas, even if they do look a little bit too far gone to really understand some of them. That leaves so far 2 more brand new mutants to analyse. I'm calling this one the Tree, but a lot of players seem to think it's John, aka the Worm from the original, in his new form. Pretty much like the twins, conjoined, but this time held together by their legs, so it seems, and maybe not actually fused. I don't really see the comparison too much to the original Worm that appeared in the late game in the original, as that one was made up quite a lot of smaller unique creatures or would multiply quite rapidly, whereas this looks like it's pretty set in the way that it is moving around in the first clips we see. But equally terrifying if you go to chop a tree down and then all of a sudden it starts moving and you realise you're chopping into Worm 2.0. But perhaps scariest of them all is the giant hand or the flinger. This is what threw one of the mutants or cannibals at the helicopter, causing it to crash in the original trailer as our best guest, and of course grabbing or dragging one of the army soldiers into the bush. Could it be a massive hand just like the Addams family? Probably not, which makes it even more scarier that it could be attached to something massive and large. And while I'll be talking more about Virginia and the NPCs in a separate video, a brief mention that obviously Virginia 2.0 is looking a little bit more slender and not maybe as voluptuous as the original, retaining more of the features of a regular humanoid, albeit with the extra leg and arms. And then a good old classic mutants, or that's what I used to call them, that we find in the caves. Revamped now, instead of just sitting around sometimes, the Creepies will have their own proper patrol paths inside their dungeons, and opening up too many of these caves could unleash way too many Creepies that could upset the balance of the factions, making it much harder for you in the long run. And that leaves us with just regular creatures that we'll come across. Obviously the first game had crocodile, sharks and boars as the main dangerous ones that you'd encounter. So far it looks like maybe only sharks are returning, and additionally killer whales. And again, more common ones that you might expect, things like deer, birds, seagulls, fish, turtles and bats, all making some sort of return, alongside butterflies, fireflies and seashells. I do kind of hope there is more kind of creatures that will hunt us other than just the mutants, possibly wolves and others, but there is a good explanation why we don't come across too many bloodthirsty animals. Simply put, they've been eaten by the mutants or killed by the cannibals. The alpha predator on the original island is the Creepies or the cannibals. But with a 4 times larger space to explore, I'm hoping we will see a little bit more variety in some of the other creatures that we'll have to fight. So there you go, as best as I can, piecing together from the gameplay footage and the IGN exclusive hands-on, as well as other answers we've got from people like Farkit and more. Hopefully I'll be able to give you proper gameplay myself soon. On release date I'll be here for sure with lots of gameplay guides, so make sure you're subscribed and look out for more analysis videos later on this week. Until next time, ratbags, laters.